Hello everyone and welcome back to Local Liberty. This is Brian and Shane. We are here with another segment in our college chat series. We're going to discuss something from Shane's Principles of Microeconomics class at QVCC.
Indeed, it's so exciting.
And what we have is a list of 20 things that economists agree on, 20 propositions, and the percentage of economists who agree on each one of these. And before we dive into this, I just want to throw out one initial thought and then we'll follow up at the end, and I'll sort of tie back into that thought. Isn't that fancy? Most economists today, most people that consider themselves, professional economists in the field, work for the government directly, in particular the Federal Reserve, or they work at higher education institutions that are closely intertwined with government. That's both public and private. There's still education, as we know, is very closely intertwined with the state. So keep that thought in mind as we go through these entries. And we'll start with number 20 and work our way up to number 1.
Ooh, it's excitement. I love it. I love a countdown.
Oh, there's nothing more exciting than microeconomics. All right, so number 20. Government subsidies on ethanol in the United States should be reduced or eliminated. Yes, I agree.
78% of economists agree with you, Brian.
And I am on board with eliminating subsidies. Any of them and all of them.
I also agree with this. The ethanol subsidies just disrupt the market. It doesn't make any sense how much money we pump into corn production. What? It's bizarre.
Yes, it's bizarre. The whole ethanol thing is bizarre on lots of levels. One of them is just the environmental aspect of burning thousands of gallons of diesel in tractors to then turn that corn into diesel again, or ethanol or gasoline, whatever the case may be. Economically, environmentally, the ethanol subsidies are just crazy. Okay, number 19, effluent taxes. That would be sewage, not affluent. Effluent taxes and marketable pollution permits represent a better approach to pollution control than the imposition of pollution ceilings.
78% agree
again,
with that.
I keep forgetting the number.
Yeah.
So I am going to take the liberty, since we're on the show called Local Liberty, slightly rewording this question to say that not, whether it's taxes or permits are a better solution. I'm going to say that the best solution is treating pollution as trespass and fundamentally dealing with it as an activity from that standpoint, rather than what this question is getting at is pollution ceilings would just be an economic control, and taxes are also an economic centralized push-down control. So I'm not in favor of any way to control pollution that results in more power for central authority.
All right, I'm going to take the question as stated. It's an either-or proposition. Is one better than the other? And pollution ceilings are a terrible proposition because they just don't make sense, because maybe a given product has to have X amount of waste for that product to be made. This system allows any level of pollution, and then you tax that pollution. It just has less of a negative effect on the actual market. That's what these economists are being asked. But there you go. So I agree with the 78%. Let's move on to 18, Brian.
All right. Number 18, the government should restructure the welfare system along the lines of a negative income tax. Again, I have to, go ahead. You have a clear definition of what the heck they mean by negative income tax.
So I'm guessing with negative income tax, they mean the opposite of a progressive tax system like we have. I mean, it could be regressive to the sense where as you go lower and lower in the tax bracket, so you get a tax 15% rate, 10%, 5%, eventually
you get paid.
You get paid.
Right.
It's a subsidy. It's a negative 5%, negative
right.
10%. You make $100 and you have a negative 10% tax rate, you get $10 back
right.
or something, right? That's what I'm guessing, though this is a little bit vague, because I mean there probably could be a lot of things to this.
I'm gonna analyze this question from the standpoint of they both kind of amount to the same thing to me. So I will just pass on agreeing or disagreeing with this question, because fundamentally I see it as a wealth redistribution scheme, a coercive wealth redistribution scheme, which is damaging to all. It's damaging to those that it's taken from, and it's damaging to those that it's given to. So I'll pass on this one.
I would need to know more information, because if this in the real world resulted in a better, fairer system that was less harmful overall, maybe I would support it, but It just seems more likely it's just going to be more complex bureaucracy that will cause problems. But anyways, we'll move on to item number 17.
Number 17, a minimum wage increases unemployment among young and unskilled workers. 79% of economists agree.
4 out of 5 economists.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one where any economist that is going to talk about the basics of how incentives.
Supply and demand.
Well, there's supply and demand, but even deeper than that is what drives that supply and demand is the incentives that each individual perceives, and the incentives of minimum wage, as we've discussed a bunch of times, is to nudge the incentive towards not using labor. It's to replace labor with other processes that are more profitable. So, minimum wage definitely increases unemployment among the exact people that it is meant to help, which would be the unskilled or young or people that are working at that wage bracket. So I agree with this one completely.
Some of these questions I'd say are about what is. We're going to talk about this in another segment, normative versus positive analysis. Here, this question is about how the world is. And there's tons of evidence, we can see it, that if you raise the minimum wage, there is less demand for unskilled labor. Now there might be argument over how much less that is, and depends how much you raise the minimum wage, but this statement as is just a statement of fact. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to 16, Brian.
Number 16, the United States should not ban genetically modified crops. I agree with this one, and this is one where lots of folks on the free market side, the libertarian side, or any side of the spectrum, lots of folks will get behind this as a popular, yeah, ban those, and I just stick with the principled approach of these things can be solved better in the market. They can be solved better by individuals. If you don't know where your food comes from, then at the end of the day, the GMO thing really isn't at the top of your priority list. If it was at the top of your priority list, find a way to feed yourself and your family where you know it's not GMO. And look at that. You've solved the problem, and there hasn't been any growth in a centralized power. So I agree with number 16.
Also, not only have you solved the problem on your own, you've not affected somebody else's life that, say, might want the genetically modified crops. They might want GMOs. As far as, I haven't read too much about GMOs, but as far as I can tell, there's no harm, there's no danger. The risks are dramatically overblown if there are risks. But regardless of the science on the GMOs, there's still definitely a lot of people that want them. They want to purchase and they buy them in the store, and they don't care either way. So affecting those people's lives because you don't like them is not you don't want to ban it. That's silly. Just go to an alternative. There are alternatives. Right. Plenty of alternatives.
Right. And I'm actually kind of uncomfortable with the GMO thing from the, total genetic, getting in there and screwing with DNA. So I'm kind of personally, if I steer myself away from these products, but also the part that gets intertwined with this is genetically modified in the sense of breeding plants, breeding animals. You go to the, you go to the plant store or go to Mackey's and buy some seeds, and 3/4 of them are going to be hybrid seeds, deliberately genetically modified in the sense of two parent plants are bred together to produce a desirable offspring. So,
also, if using the term genetically modified, how far you take that, like you said, like you a crossbreed, genetically modified, but how far you take that is all the domesticated crops in the United States and in the world over are genetically modified via artificial selection by humans for thousands, for millennia. So now we're using more advanced technologies to speed up that process, but this is something that we've been doing in some sense for a long time.
Right.
We've been genetically modifying things.
Am I totally comfortable with Monsanto creating corn that isn't killed by Roundup? I'm not really on board with that. I don't think that's a great idea, but again, I'm not interested in having the government shut them down.
Very well then.
All
Next
right.
one.
Number 15.
Excellent.
Inflation is caused primarily by too much growth in the money supply. I will agree with this with a clarification on definitions, that inflation is the growth in the money supply. That is the original and still proper definition of the term inflation. What this document is using is the secondary definition of inflation, which is an increase in prices. And increase in prices is an effect of the underlying distortion of the money supply, of the increase in the money supply. So with that clarification, I agree. I'm in agreement with number 15.
The definition is in the question. To me, it's like, yeah, so of course you agree. What's the percentage for that one?
83%.
83%. I wonder what the other 17% thought. But anyways, let's move on.
Good question. This is my favorite one on the list here. Number 14. The redistribution of income in the United States is a legitimate role for the government. Well, 83% of economists think that they know how to spend your own money better than you do. And I say to hell with them in their 83% consensus. It is not a legitimate role of anybody else to decide what anybody does with their own property.
So here's a question which would be considered a normative question in economics. He's making a value judgment. The economist is making a value judgment about how income should be taxed or not taxed, and used or not used, the role of government in society, which is weird how they're mixing these questions up to what like economists actually do, you know, their actual work, their actual science, the science of economics, to, you know, just what they think about things, based of course on what they know in their research perhaps, but this number to me sounds probably strikingly similar to what the majority of people in the United States think. This is just a normal thing people think, right?
Unfortunately, it is. But this is the deepest and most profound consequences of all these lists. This one, number 14, has the deepest effects. You're right that 83+% of people in this country think that it's just a normal A-OK thing that the government is going to take money from person A and give it to person B. And the consequences and the far-reaching effects of that are profound. So
they are profound, and in my utopia world, I don't want it, but it seems to me it's part of society, and this is how it's going to be. So
I'd say it's part of a.
It may not be legitimate,
but part of an immoral society. It's not part of a healthy society. It's a fundamental systemic theft is what it is. And that, I don't see a healthy society that's built on that.
I've seen healthy societies built on that based on various metrics, but I think it's just it might just be the necessary evil, but we can talk about that in another episode. Let's move on.
All right, number 13, a large federal budget deficit has an adverse effect on the economy. Agreed, and I'll nuance my agreement with this. The government spending money is money they took from somebody else. The money they took from somebody else means they're basically ignoring the plans that individual had for that money or that business had for that money, and somebody in Washington D.C. is saying, you know what, I know how to spend it better than you. So yes. People in Washington, D.C. do not know how to spend money better than individuals and businesses do. So, when there's a large federal budget deficit, that means more money is being spent and more money is being taken from people, and that does have an adverse effect on the economy. Agreed.
83% agreed, Brian. And my layman's opinion, I haven't studied this too thoroughly, is I also agree, but my political science teacher, Jason Charette, was on the show for a segment of Community Chat where he talked specifically about the U.S. debt and how the worry about the U.S. debt is overblown and actually, in many ways, helps the U.S. through various processes that I can't get into now and I don't fully understand. I don't know if I agree or disagree with him, but he's an educated man. It's interesting. He studied this problem. You can check out that segment on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's a good segment. One of these days, I'm going to record a response to that segment, and maybe Jason will even come back.
Oh, you could, because he's still over at QV. I still can see him. All right, so move on to the next question. The next number.
Number 12, cash payments increase the welfare of recipients to a greater degree than do transfers in kind of equal cash value.
Percent?
84% agree on that.
84%. I believe Milton Friedman agrees with that as well. I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if advocate would be the right word, but grudgingly go, yeah, that'd be better.
Yeah, so this is one where, I know you always love my complicated qualifying answers. From the aspect of making things more efficient, and if you're going to redistribute wealth from people, if you're going to steal money from person A and take it from person B, it kind of it's plausible to say we should do that in the most efficient way possible, right? But the other side of that coin is, do we want to create a more efficient, if we translate that to just street robbers, do we want street robbers to be more efficient? I don't think, that's not necessarily a good thing, that street robbers are more efficient and skilled and effective at what they do, right? So that's my answer to this one is yes, cash payments are potentially more effective than payments in kind.
And to be clear, payments in kind would be food stamps, government health care, things of that nature, WIC, all those things.
Right, more effective in the simpler, more efficient sense, certainly. A good thing? No, I don't think so. So that's my sort of, I guess that's another pass for me on this one. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with this one.
I go along with the Economist. It seems to be that would be the case in terms of efficiency. And I'm just sticking to the question as posed, the proposition as posed, the Economist. Continue.
All right, number 11. The gap between Social Security funds and expenditures will become unsustainably large within the next 50 years if current policies remain unchanged. I agree and say that they are already unsustainably large. We do not have to wait 50 years.
85% agree with you, Brian. The gap between Social Security funds and expenditures will become unsustainably large within the next 50 years if current policies remain unchanged. That's the key. If things remain unchanged, well, it's an untenable system. Now, I think things will probably change inevitably because they'll have to, but based on the current evidence,
the changes are basically, I think, going to fall into only a couple of categories. One change is the whole system will collapse. That's a possibility. Second possibility is they will slowly grind more and more and more and more revenue, or I don't want to use revenue. They'll take more money, more resources from the producers, from the producing side of the population, and give it to the recipient side until it collapses, or until people just plain revolt. So if the policies remain unchanged, sort of implies we can make this work and make it happy long term. When this was sustainable from the beginning, it's unsustainable at day one. It's unsustainable now. And it'll be unsustainable in 50 years.
It doesn't imply that. It's just making the question very clear. Because otherwise you could say all kinds of things. It's like we're keeping everything else equal. If everything else remains the same, cerebus paribus. All other things remain constant. But let's move on.
All right. Number 10. If the federal budget, we are in the top 10. If the federal budget is to be balanced, it should be done over the business cycle rather than yearly. I think what they mean here is if we're going to make changes to the overall fiscal policy or the government budget, it should be gradual as opposed to drastic. I think what they're saying here, and there's clearly making drastic changes is going to have drastic effects on people. But sometimes drastic change can be drastically good. The 1946, there was a whole bunch of economists going, oh my God, we spend gazillions of dollars on World War II and we've pulled it all back because there's no more war to fight. The economy's going to collapse. And what do you know? What happened? The strongest growth, the most explosive growth the economy has ever experienced happened in the 1 year, 1946. People's money and freedom was released back to them from some crazy economic controls that happened during World War II that most people don't even know existed anymore because they were all rolled back. But there was some crazy, tight, almost like full-on Bernie socialist controls in World War II. And when those were released, the economy started a tremendous period of growth. So I'm going to disagree with this one that says you can make drastic changes. What those changes should be is scaling things back and releasing people's freedom and letting them run their own plans and following their own, using their own information, their own knowledge to decide how to use their own resources. That can be done in fairly quick order.
Brian, I'm going to disagree with you. After post-World War II, we did experience a massive economic growth, but there's many factors involved. And just because this one time this drastic situation happened, I think here they're saying, generally speaking, which one's better, which one's preferable. Go with the one that generally works better. There might be an exception to the rule, but I think I don't really know exactly what they mean by the business cycle. So if they mean, I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
Let's
what
move
they
on.
mean, what they mean by the business cycle is government spending should contract when the economy is contracting, and government spending should expand when the economy is expanding.
The Keynesian kind of model.
Kind of. I mean, that's part of the model. Yes,
Right.
At least that was part of the model. Now the Keynesian model has been turned into neo-hyper insanity Keynesian, which is expand government spending all the time, more.
And Keynes was an economist from the 20s or 30s. John Maynard Keynes? John?
The 30s, I think he wrote the General Theory or something. That was his famous book that, gee, what do you know? The economist that writes a book that justifies massive government growth, strangely enough, that was the economist that the government latched onto. Instead of his contemporaries that were saying, no, government growth is a bad thing. Strangely enough, they latched on and lauded and basically turned into a saint the one economist, or not the one economist, but an economist that promoted a theory that basically said endless government spending is a good thing.
Mm.
Funny coincidence. Number 9. Local and state governments should eliminate subsidies to professional sports franchises. Absolutely. I agree. These always turn out to be a disaster for the local folks in the community. The taxpayers are always the ones that get stuck with the short end of these sticks. All this sports franchise stuff is just good old crony capitalism, and we have the latest round of crony capitalist ridiculous happening in Hartford with our friends the Yard Goats. And yes, that is an actual name of a minor league baseball team in Hartford. Their stadium is being built. It's over budget, behind schedule. And I kept seeing this name in the newspapers, Yard Goats. I'm like, this is a joke. This is on the Onion. It's a satire.
Right.
And so finally, I read it like, no, this is actually the name of a team. The Yard Goats.
Yard Goats.
I mean, maybe it's an awesome name for a team.
It sounds like a name of a bluegrass band.
Yeah, it does. I can't wait to see the mascot. Anyway, number 9, total agreement. Eliminate the crony sports franchise cronyism.
85% of economists agree with you, Brian, and I also agree. If people want it, yes, I agree. That's it. It's simple. Don't give millions of dollars to the Yard Goats is one example, but another example is like NFL owners and these billionaires are like, hey, I'm a billionaire, but I'm not going to pay for this. I'm going to get the local city to pay for it, which is like so outrageous.
Yeah. Pretty much. All right. Number 8, an appropriately designed fiscal policy can increase the long-run rate of capital formation. How we're supposed to read this is there's economic voodoo experts who know how to spend your money better than you do. So I'm going to go with disagree. There is no way to design fiscal policy. In other words, there's no way for a government to build their budget and decide how they're going to spend other people's money that is going to increase, that is going to do better than people could have done on their own. There's this general fallacy that centralized plans of the government are to replace the chaos that would have been in the marketplace. But no, everybody in the market has plans. They have their own plans based on their own knowledge, their own studying, their own experience. And so I completely disagree with this one. There is no appropriately designed policy that will increase capital formation. Okay,
the key here is, what is fiscal policy? I'm going to go to number 4 briefly. Fiscal policy, it's right here. It is defined as tax cut and or government expenditure increase. So that is a very broad definition to me of fiscal policy. So that could be, we're going to have a new fiscal policy of lowering taxes, removing this element for government, removing this element, because they're talking not about a hypothetical world, I'm guessing, but they're just thinking about governments as they are and moving forward. Can you make the economy better or worse depending on your fiscal policy, which your fiscal policy could just be tax cuts, for example. Your fiscal policy seems like could be all kinds of things.
But the or part, increased government expenditure.
Or it's and or.
Well,
so it could be tax cut.
Yeah.
It could be government expenditure, or be tax cut and government expenditure. Any of those 3 options. So I am going to agree. Appropriately designed fiscal policy can increase the long-run rate of capital formation based on the definition I just gave.
If that appropriately designed fiscal policy means less government spending. That's an important if. All right. Number 7, the United States should eliminate agricultural subsidies. Yes, this is pretty much, we've covered this angle on a bunch of other questions. These subsidies are nothing more than just market distortions. Some of them are hugely politically entrenched. They've been happening for 100+ years. They start with this benign goal of, oh, we have to save the farmers, we have to save this or that, and really all it ends up doing is becoming this entrenched, politicized way of cronyism. And you have all sorts of farmers that even they might be trapped in this. Maybe they don't want anything to do with these subsidies, but that's just how this is now. The major agriculture out west is so distorted, and a lot of it ends up being, we can buy a box of Cheerios for $2, but what is one of the real tasks of an economist is to analyze the seen and the unseen effects of agricultural subsidies they run deep. So yes, I agree with number 7. Eliminate the ag subsidies.
85% of economists agree with you, and here's the thing I also agree. Here's something I find interesting though. Government subsidies on ethanol in the United States should be reduced or eliminated. 78%. But here, this is 85%. To me, that shows a little bit of wonky thinking on some of these economists' part.
It's inconsistent.
Right, it's inconsistent, and there's a problem here. Because agricultural subsidies, that takes into account ethanol subsidies about corn, right?
Yeah.
That as the whole, and this is just a piece of it. So the piece of it you should always be 100% against if you're against the whole in this case, right? So there's not.
You would think.
It's illogical. So there's something wrong here, but that's irrelevant.
Yep. And I forget who said this, but it's a great quote of you know how I love butchering quotes, Shane. If you say that you're against government farm subsidies, that doesn't mean you're against growing wheat. Growing wheat is a good thing. Food is great. Government subsidized, distorted food, no, not so great.
We're pro-food on Local Liberty.
Yes, we are.
Let's move on to item number
6. Economic growth in developed countries like the United States leads to greater levels of well-being. I agree with this one in the sense of this is kind of obvious, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding what this question is. You'd have to ask the opposite of this question: does economic collapse or does economic decline lead to greater levels of well-being? Of course not. So this is, yes, I agree with this question. The richer we are, the better off we are.
88% of economists agree with you.
Yet I want to talk to the 12% that disagree with that one.
I would like to talk to those 12%, but either way, this seems pretty basic. Let's move on.
All right.
Oh, you know what? I could think of one angle that they're thinking about. Like, say we have a greater economic well-being, and then we can fund like our massive, warfares across the world. Whereas you have less economic well-being, then we can't fund the warfare state.
Right. But
maybe they're moving it like way far out. Like
maybe. But this doesn't even hint at the concept of foreign policy or global.
No, I understand that, but I'm thinking that why someone might say that.
Yeah.
That's a charitable response because I could see some legitimacy to that, but I'm wondering. Oh no, but we have to move on now, Brian.
All right. Number 5, the United States should not restrict employers from outsourcing work to foreign countries. This is another one like the ag subsidies that is a hugely politicized economic topic. And this kind of goes back to the good old South Park episodes of they took our germ. That's basically this, and it's very understandable. It's natural for people to think that, or to experience in a short term, for sure. If you have a good job, you're happy with your work, and all of a sudden your company shuts down and they send your job to India. Yes, that hurts. That's painful. That causes immediate loss to the person that literally just lost their job.
I mean, here we've experienced that in Willimantic with the thread companies. That the whole textile industry has moved overseas now in the United States.
But basically, what this is, and this comes back to the seen versus the unseen. And what this is saying, well, first, the United States should not restrict employers from outsourcing work to foreign countries. Yes, I agree with that. And now to explain why is because basically what that says is if a business wants to move their operation to China, they can do it more profitably. What that means, to do something more profitably, means they can serve their customers better, and more customers want their product. So the globalizing of the economy, as in the narrow sense, it can be scary on individualized local levels, but the globalization of the economy makes us all richer. You have to really stretch it to say in the United States that we're not better off, that we can't draw on the productive capacity of the entire world now, where people are willing to work a lot cheaper. And now what we've done in the United States, a lot of it has moved to service industry, and it's not like working to provide a service for somebody is somehow worse than to manufacture a widget. Providing value is what counts. And there's people in Japan and China and Indonesia that are providing value to us. And now we're left to find better ways to provide value to each other and back to them. And long story short, this is one where you just kind of have to learn some of the fundamentals of economics, and then you can understand that ultimately it's a good thing that our economy is globalizing.
90% agree with you, Brian. This is, as economies of scale, you involve more people, you can get better outcomes overall for a population.
And specialization.
Right.
People in China can specialize, and we can specialize, and we trade, and we're happier.
Yes. Now, I agree with this definitely. One thing that Brian didn't bring up is, people talk about the hit on us, the people in the United States. People lose their jobs, jobs are outsourced, and that sucks. No one wants that. But think about those people in the other countries that are desperate for jobs and they want a job. To me, it's like, well, they're being helped. They're in a desperate situation and they want these jobs. A lot of times people think, oh, this is slave labor, this is this or that. But usually, like say Nike opens a plant in Indonesia. People will be outside in a line. They want that job. They pay better than companies in surrounding areas. This is helping everybody. There may be some pains in the short run, and if your whole economy is based on a certain industry like Willimantic was, yes, that was bad, but that's why you should be diversified in the first place, and not put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that you need to comfort yourself with your own job loss because somebody in India got employed. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is
it's fairness.
Well, not even fairness. It's ultimately a benefit to you. Now, yes, you may have to look for a different job. You may have to learn some new skills. But the world as a whole, which includes you and me, became richer when there's production taking place.
This really is like a whole other topic. Because that benefit to you thing is not, if your life did just get destroyed, but that's a whole other thing about that we could talk about.
Right. It's an indirect and long-term benefit.
So there's
complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. So let's just move on to item number 4. I mean, number 4.
That is a good topic for another.
Yeah,
that's really one of the core economic issues that is going to be political, especially in this campaign.
Right.
Jobs.
Yes.
It always comes up. All right, number 4.
Number 4.
Fiscal policy, e.g. tax cuts or government expenditure increase, two opposite things, has a significant stimulative impact on a less than fully employed economy. Again, complicated economic voodoo, experts know better than you way of trying to make the point that the government can take money from you and that you'll be made better off. So I'm not going to get it. I'm going to skip the and versus or permutations and just take it at its face value of they mean the government's spending more money to have a stimulative impact. Stimulus does not mean, in the political context, spending less money. The stimulative impact no, that you don't stimulate the economy by the government spending more money. That's Keynesianism, and I say no thanks.
90% disagree with you, Brian. And actually, no, let me correct that. No one disagrees with you because you just changed the question. So now you've answered another question.
No, lots of people will disagree with me on that because they favor government spending.
No one in this survey disagrees with you because that question wasn't asked as Brian defined it. So, as they define it, I agree. Let's just move on to number 3, though.
Okay. We're going to have to find a way to post this picture because this is not going to make sense to...
you scanned it. Did you... Can you just send it to me? Oh yeah, I got the file. We're going to put it up there for you folks.
Yes. All right. Flexible, and this is number 3, flexible and floating exchange rates offer an effective international monetary arrangement. I can't help myself, Shane.
Oh!
They are flexible and floating exchange rates of fiat currency compared to everybody pegging their currency and manipulating it like crazy and the whole global economy just becoming dysfunctional. Yes, flexible and floating is better than that. However, flexible and floating exchange rates based on international monetary arrangements of totally distorted fiat currencies that are not a store of value, that totally, the notion of inflation, money supply, the prices, that's all over the map. Not a healthy thing. So yes, to answer this question, I agree with the monetary system that we're stuck with now, letting prices float, as in what the market does. That's better than trying to peg prices at the central bank or at the government level.
90% kind of agree with you, Brian. I can't answer this. I just don't know enough. I don't know enough about this issue to make an educated yes or no, nay or yay. So let's move on to, we only have 2 left. It's so exciting.
We are getting there. We're going to get inside of 40 minutes, maybe. Tariffs and import quotas usually reduce general economic welfare.
But you might want to rephrase that. This is the free trade question. That's what this is.
Well, we can't do rephrase. You can't yell at me for rephrasing.
No. I'm rephrasing. I'm putting in different words because they're the same meaning.
Okay.
You're making a new meaning. I'm just making it easier to understand. Tariffs and import quotas. These are hindrances to free trade. This is free trade is not having tariffs and import quotas. That's not free trade. That's essentially what this question is saying.
Yeah. Okay. Tariffs and import quotas usually reduce economic freedom, economic welfare, general economic welfare. Yes. Yes, they do. And it goes back to this thing I've said, 15 times now. A tariff and an import quota essentially means somebody's going to distort the price of something and manipulate your decision to buy it without your input, without your permission. And basically it's saying, we're going to make a TV from China more expensive than a TV from Japan just because we feel like it, even though maybe you really wanted the TV from China. So no, you know how to spend your money better than somebody else does. Agreed.
Brian, 93% of economists agree with you. I also definitely agree with this. I mean, this is a basic economic concept that we talk about. That I want to do a segment on about how I'm going to ignore some of the greater details about it right now. But just think about this. Like Brian said, you're a person. You want to buy something. And you can buy the United States made, TV or the one in China. But if they put this huge, tax on it, essentially, that'll cost more money. For what? Who benefits? That American TV manufacturer might benefit, but again, so it's only a small group that benefits. Whereas having lower prices benefits everyone.
But who collects the tariff? Who gets to keep the tariff?
United States.
The big old G-man. So
the G-man.
You get, so yes, again, this is kind of go back to the pollution thing. You've got a problem you want to solve. Well, let's see. Your solution restricts my freedom and results in more resources getting siphoned to the central government. No thank you, and no thank you.
Also, this did do some interesting things. Like, for example, apparently there's still a high, I think it's a tariff on trucks, like from foreign countries. So like Toyota only.
Yes, that's why they manufacture them.
Yeah, they only do them here. That's very interesting. And these are all kinds of other odd distortions, like the startup cost for a Toyota having to build that plant. That raised prices slightly. All these little things raise prices slightly.
Who pays? At the end of the day,
the consumer.
Are the consumer, us little guys that are trying to live our life, always pay? always pay for it. And who reaps the benefits? The takers. And I don't mean the folks on welfare. I mean the folks that are really controlling, the real parasitic class, the ones that are controlling the economy and the decisions at the central level. They benefit, we pay. That's the result of all these things.
And one other thing to bring up about benefits, yes, so the government benefits, but also benefits is very small groups. So let's say that American company that makes X, Y, or Z, and they have tariffs on that, so they can stay in business. So that benefits that small company. So it's a small group of people benefit, but everyone else is slightly hurt. And here's where the politics come into play. Those people that are slightly hurt don't really care enough to think about the issue. Oh, a tariff on some hand tool or something, I didn't care about that, whatever. But those people that are manufacturing those hand tools, or whatever it happens to be, that matters a lot to them. So they lobby the government. The government hears from those people. And then this happens all over the place with so many groups all lobbying for their piece of the pie. And it just creates this thing where everyone's working against each other.
Everybody's up in arms about that Citizen United case from a few years ago that allowed all sorts of money, presumably from big businesses, to flow into politics.
It was already there, folks.
It was, but now it's a lot more explicit, and the scale is probably going to go up. These businesses are not pumping money into people's campaigns out of altruism. They're not pumping money into the government just because they love taking care of needy kids. They're doing this. It's an investment. They are doing it for their own benefit, as everybody else operates for their own benefit.
Right. You vote for someone, you give $10 to a campaign, what do you expect? I mean, you're doing it because you endorse those policies. And they say, and of course, if you're a big business, like, oh, I endorse your pro-business policies towards me.
Right. So it's the having that option on the table for a business to be able to lobby a politician to get a tariff imposed. That option is what needs to go away. And a lot of the money, if there's no reason for people to pour their money into politics, then the money won't get poured in there. It'll get poured to much more productive use.
Also, should we note about that decision, though, is a lot of people don't like that decision. But if say you restricted somehow, I don't know how you actually would do this practically, restricted the money into politics, what would happen is you'd get the two-party system even more entrenched. Because the media is always going to cover the incumbent. They're always going to cover the other major party. So if you're a third party, if you're green, if you're libertarian, if you're bottom line, if you're any of these parties, your only option is grassroots, money, buying ads, doing these things. And it's just going to hurt you. You're going to be screwed over in the end. Because you don't have that entrenched position in the media.
Right. That's right. Okay. Number
one.
Kind of a letdown. A ceiling on rents reduces the quantity and quality of housing available. Yes, price controls affect things. A price is the most fundamental aspect of a market economy. Without a price, nobody can coordinate anything. Nobody knows what the hell anything's worth. Nobody knows how much they should produce of X or Y or Z. Consumers can't compare value. If a rent ceiling is a price control, and minimum wage is a price control. Milk price, a floor on milk prices is a price control. It's a distortion, just as this question implies. It reduces the quantity and quality of housing available. It hurts the people that it is allegedly meant to serve.
93% agree with you, Brian. We talked about this issue. I think in my last class, this issue was discussed. And my teacher, he gave a few examples from some of the major cities like New York. What happened when rent control was put into place across the United States is housing dramatically declined. There are just less options available. Whole buildings were converted to office or just left to rot because it wasn't worth.
People respond to it.
Right, exactly. And then the ones that remained open were the quality declined because the landlord's like, well, I'm not going to bother fixing that. I'm not going to bother fixing that. And then another thing happened is landlords, feasibly they could not rent an apartment for X amount of dollars. They feasibly couldn't do it. So they went for another alternative. Hey, it's $300 rent a month, but if you give me a little extra. So then people just started paying upfront fee under the table to get their apartments. And again, what happened is some people did benefit. A small number of people got these extremely low rent apartments. I forget, an example was given in class where if there's a family, I forget how many people were in the family. I think there might have been 5, and then the parents. There might have been 7 people or so in the family. Eventually, all the kids moved away. The husband died, the parents died, and then there was this old elderly lady living in this giant place meant for a family,
Right.
2-family like apartment, like 5 bedrooms or something, for a ridiculously low price. She could easily move somewhere else and be fine, but because the price is so artificially low, she just stays there,
Yeah.
and no one else can now get in there, and a family actually needs to be in there. It creates such bizarre distortions.
Distortions just reverberate back and forth, and create unintended consequences. But at the end of the day, it's the little guy that gets hurt. That when you take away freedom, when you damage the market, the consumer pays the price. So that is our list. We made it from number 20 to number 1. This was a good conversation. This touched on a lot of basic, important concepts of economics that I love discussing this stuff because this is fundamental to understanding how the world works. Economics is about understanding human interaction, and if you can ground that in some basic concepts and some basic philosophies or science or whatever you want to call it, some basic ideas, I think you can sort through a lot of the voodoo that you read in the papers where people are talking about things that just seem complicated, but you can learn how to sort of rephrase what they mean and be suspicious. Healthy suspicion is a beautiful thing. I have one final thought. Remember, I wanted to wrap this into the beginning where I said, lots of professional economists work in one way or another for the government. And so here's my quote. This is from, I believe this is attributed to Upton Sinclair, the guy that wrote The Jungle, a socialist propagandist from the turn of the 20th century. And here's his quote: "It's hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it." I think that's a good way to wrap up this segment on 20 things that mainstream economists agree on. So, thanks for listening, everybody. This has been Brian and Shane at Local Liberty. You can check us out on Facebook and YouTube. And if there's any local events or happenings or anything of interest that can be talked about from the perspective of politics, freedom, government, things that we could help you understand from a libertarian perspective, let us know. I'd be more than happy to look into them.
Just let us know, even if you don't understand what everything Brian said. There's something interesting to you locally. Let us know. We'll figure it out from there. We'll see what happens. Maybe you can be on the show. Maybe we can talk to you.
Camera.
If you'd like to be on camera, we are trying to do that. We have the community chat segment. And always remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share.
That's right.
We love doing this. It's fun.
Thanks for listening, guys. This is Brian and Shane from Local Liberty. Take care.